And it looks like we're right on time. So now we're gonna jump into our session on clean energy 101 and opportunities. Now we're going to jump into the first keynote presentation of the day, Clean Energy 101 and Opportunities. We're happy to have Terri Lynn Morrison, the Associate Executive Director of Indigenous Clean Energy, also known as ICE, joining us today. Terri Lynn is a proud First Nations Mi'kmaq woman from Listugush in the province of Quebec, where she was born and raised. Terri Lynn brings many qualities to her work, including her understanding of First Nation realities and passion for Indigenous involvement in a just transition. In July of 2019, Terri Lynn joined Indigenous Clean Energy team as the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Communications. Recently, she became the Associate Director of ICE, and her work now focuses on increasing Indigenous engagement and outreach for ICE as a whole and advancing Indigenous inclusion in Canada's clean energy economy. Her clean energy journey began in 2014 when she became the project director for the 150 megawatt wind farm that was owned and developed with the 3 Mi'kmaq communities and their partner Interjex Renewable Energy Inc. from Longwell, Quebec. This project was recognized by the Quebec wind industry, where it received Excellence in Human Resource Award, and Terri Lynn was recognized as the rising star for her contribution in fostering social acceptability for this project. Well, all in for joining us, and now I'll pass it over to you, Terri Lynn.
Thank you, Stan. I'd like to thank the elder for her opening prayer this morning and the entire team at JEDI for putting this wonderful program together for the next 2 days. Happy to be here and presenting. Not gonna lie, a little bit nervous. As Stan mentioned, I am from Listuguj, so JEDI's headquarters in Fredericton is certainly an area that I'm familiar with since I did go to university at UNB. So always a little bit more nervous when we're speaking to people from home, but so happy to be here with you all this morning. I am joining you from the unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory in Ottawa, where I am now living as a guest, where I moved since 2019 when I switched to join the incredible team here at Indigenous Clean Energy, where we are working hard to support Indigenous inclusion for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leadership in clean energy across the country. So before I get started on today's presentation, which is talking about the spectrum of clean energy, a bit about the past and where the future is heading, I did want to share just a little bit about my experience working in clean energy. So back in 2014, I was a part of a great team that were working for the 3 Mi'kmaq communities, Listuguj, Geskebegyak, and Gespeg, where we received the mandate to go ahead and build and own in partnership 150 megawatt wind farm. At the time, there was a lot of development taking place in the province, and specifically in Gespegawagi, our territory. There was somewhere around 1,600 megawatts of wind energy being developed, and not one Mi'kmaq, well, there was 2 Mi'kmaq workers working there. One was working as a flag turner and another as an electrician. So we needed to change that story. We recognized that there was an opportunity there for our community members to get trained and to have meaningful employment in the region, looking outside of the boundaries of the reserve. So we had a very clear vision there and direction, and we were able to, at the end of it, build and own 150 megawatt wind farm that put 116 Mi'kmaq to work outside of the reserve in the province of Quebec, which was unheard of. So, it took a lot of work, it took a lot of time, and I'm happy to share some of that experience, which is what pivoted me to come and work, to take what we learned at Meskigukjuzen and that experience that I had working with industry, working with community, working with leadership, and share that with other communities across the country who are trying to have success in this space, or to learn from others that are having success in this space. So I'm incredibly blessed to have networks across the country and to have learned. So I will speak to you today about the clean energy futures, and I'm opening it up. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a note, and I'll be happy to get going from there. So I'll ask Kayla to pull up the presentation, and we'll get started. So the presentation title today is Pathways to Prosperity, Energy Futures and Indigenous Leadership. And if we go to the next slide, just want to recap some of the key points. So Indigenous leadership is central to an abundant clean energy future for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We are in the midst of a transition to a new clean energy future, and the future of energy is different from the past. Indigenous communities are clean energy leaders, and many things are changing, and energy is becoming more integrated. A spectrum of clean energy opportunities exist, and they are also very much in line with the Sustainable Development Goals that we're working hard towards as we are transitioning towards a net zero. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the evolution, the revolution, and the transition of energy. So in the past, energy was typically a colonial enterprise that, was run by monopolies, controlled by governments, dominated by utilities. They're large, they're centralized systems, and with a low cost prime focus and have really big transmission. So when we're talking about the colonial enterprise, we're talking about the hydro dams, that have devastated some communities. We're talking about the big infrastructure that's put in that didn't do business in the right way, before consultation and impact benefit agreements were the standard procedure, and consultation and consent. Unfortunately, that was how the past was done. Right now, well, not necessarily right now, but in the past decade or so, there was a huge clean energy growth, where renewable energy was becoming the main source, and there was a transition away from fossil fuels, coal, and going more towards the green renewable projects, such as the big wind projects, solar, run of the river, and those type of things. And during that time, some of the provinces and territories were beginning to change how they were looking at energy. They were looking at getting more benefits and diversification. So, looking at an innovation and innovative ways to provide efficient, reliable, safe, affordable energy to their clients and to community. But right now, what we're starting to see is, as we're looking towards net zero and what our targets are to reduce greenhouse gases, there's a real push towards energy efficiency. So when we're thinking about clean energy, we're starting to shift away from the big renewable energy projects and starting to look at what this means in community and in ourselves as individuals. So energy efficiency being one of the biggest opportunities that we have moving forward in the future, as it relates to how we're heating our houses, how we're building our houses, our buildings in our communities, the cost that is tied to running them. So there's a huge opportunity there in energy efficiency. Also, we're seeing many more remote microgrids that are coming into place, especially in remote communities that are relying on diesel. So there's a heavy shift to support projects that are going to get communities off of diesel. I'm lucky to work in a community in northern Quebec, Inukjuak, where they're doing a 7.5 megawatt run of the river project that's going to eliminate 100% their need for diesel in their community. So quite proud of that work there. But to give you an example of how some of the communities in other parts of the country are, where they have to rely 100% on diesel fuel to heat their homes and to give them power. So again, we're looking at advanced energy systems, and the way that distribution and transmission is done is changing and evolving. There's also a large energy infrastructure, the needs that are taking place, and there's opportunity to have Indigenous communities involved in that in a big way. And then also sharing the success or learning off of what's happening across the country with other communities at a global perspective, at a global level. So if we go to the next slide, I know it gets to be kind of a lot of information, but it'll all come together. But when we talk about how energy is changing, when we're looking at an integrated energy market, you see that there's a lot of moving parts there. So, we have the partnerships, we have the projects, so the renewable energy projects, we have the transport side of things. When we're looking at transport, there's a huge opportunity, that's coming as it relates to green hydrogen and electric vehicles, so electrification of vehicles in communities and fleets, so that we're not using the oil and we're able to power it off of renewable clean energy. Also decentralizing the way that energy is produced, stored, and transmitted in more decentralized systems. There's also a huge concern around climate and the need to take action to protect the damaging effects that are happening to us. We have our rules, our policies in each of the provinces and territories that are different from, province to province. So there's always those considerations that have to be considered, as well as transmission. So for any project, it's all a part of a larger system that you need to be able to transmit. So it's all connected. Always looking at cost, of course, to make sure that projects are feasible and that you're going to be able to have a return, and that you're maximizing on the efficiency so that you're not wasting, and very much in line with our values as Indigenous people to take only what we need, and making sure that we're not leaving a large footprint behind. So when projects are being developed, all of these components need to be considered, and that's how things are changing. Another thing that's changing, if we go to the next slide, is the amount of Indigenous ownership and involvement in clean energy projects. So these numbers may be a little bit dated. We'll do another study probably later this year, but I can say that right now there's over 200 medium to large projects in the country that are owned or in partnership with Indigenous communities. And what that means is that Indigenous communities are actually the largest owner of clean energy assets, next to private utility and government. We're really big players in this space in the country, and I get excited when I hear about it, and I don't know if we know that enough about ourselves, that we are leaders with over 200 medium to large projects and over 2,300 smaller projects that have over 45% Indigenous ownership. What this translates into, during construction and operation, for the most part construction, but we'll talk about that later on in the next 2 days. But that represents 1,600 jobs to Indigenous community members, with an with an estimate of about $295 million in return. So there's already significant work that's been done in this space, and we will talk a lot more about the opportunity to come. And we can go to the next slide here, where I'm just going to touch quickly on the uses of electricity. So we do use electricity for power. So when we turn our lights on in our houses, we also use it for heating and cooling, for our cold winters and our hotter summers that we're starting to get in the Atlantic and Mi'kma'ki. But for sure, I know that when I was a young girl, air conditioner wasn't really something that we had in homes, but definitely something that I don't want to go without anymore when I'm visiting my parents back home. And then also for transport and shipping. So, we do have our opportunities that could be available in terms of, the ports that exist. I heard talk of Port of Beldoon. So there's opportunity there in renewables and how we're powering, fleets and boats and all of these things. So go to the next slide. And here I'm going to break down a bit more about the clean energy spectrum of opportunity. I think we skipped a slide, Kayla. If we can just go back one to the wheel. It looks like it's not available. Okay, that's fine. For some reason, it's not showing up. So I'll just speak to it while that slide is up. So basically, when we're talking about the spectrum of clean energy opportunities, when we're looking at energy and conservation, just to break it down a little bit more, we're really looking at community energy planning. So setting the stage in communities for what the clean energy future can look like. Really taking inventory of what your current assets are, and where your gaps are, and how you want to tighten that up. So doing the work to do community energy planning is a really important step towards energy efficiency and conservation. Also, looking at opportunities for clean energy services and technologies. When we're talking about how we're building energy efficiency material and equipment, there's an opportunity to have Indigenous entrepreneurs or businesses start up that develop expertise to service these energy efficiency equipments. So also, there's opportunity to do deep housing and facility energy retrofits with high energy performance materials. And in Indigenous communities, we're very big on our employment and housing, and having people in our communities doing that work. So there's a huge opportunity in the energy efficiency space right there. In terms of advanced energy grid systems, here we're looking at energy storage, electric and cooling heating, clean fuels, smart grids, and energy information technologies. So the advanced tech does represent opportunities and something that we don't want to forget about. So I'm just mentioning them because oftentimes when we think about clean energy, we get caught up on the wind farms and the solar farms, and we don't think about the other opportunities, the spectrum of opportunities that exist. So that's why I just want to spend some time going over, within the different quadrants, what kind of projects could qualify as clean energy that aren't necessarily just a renewable energy project. So in the green energy infrastructure spectrum, here you can look at transmission projects. I know that in the Atlantic, we're familiar with the Atlantic Loop, for example, so the opportunities that could exist in there. Also renewable energy microgrids, district energy, electric vehicle infrastructure. So the charging stations that are getting put up in communities in New Brunswick. I know that in Ukpigunchik there's one, and a few others that are done in partnership with NB Power. So those type of initiatives. And also hydrogen infrastructure. So just recognizing what it takes to produce hydrogen, and looking at how those systems can be set up in our areas. And then also we have the renewable energy spectrum, where we see the wind energy, bioenergy, geothermal, solar, all of those projects that we're more familiar with when we think about clean energy. And so with all of that, this kind of ties into the bigger picture here on the Sustainable Development Goals, which actually, when we take a look at it, is in line very much with how Indigenous communities do projects. When we think about how communities are accountable and how leadership have to set up our projects, we're always ensuring that no one gets left behind, that we're able to provide affordable clean energy to our communities. Number one value that I've seen with communities is that even though we may not understand fully what clean energy is and what it represents, we're still more keen to do clean energy projects than we are not, and to look towards fossil fuels. So this is very much in line with our values, and one of the reasons why I identify very closely with clean energy. Also, it helps us support climate action. Working to reduce our carbon footprint and our greenhouse gas to protect Mother Earth from this global warming that's unavoidable. Also, it helps bring projects together, partnerships, where we're working together, where Indigenous communities are supported, where we're advancing innovation and infrastructure, and we're creating good health and well-being, and getting our women and our youth and our everybody that hasn't had a normal opportunity or the equal opportunity to come forward to have that opportunity to do so. And clean energy projects that are done in Indigenous communities are really done this way. When we're providing training opportunities, and we're really working hard to ensure that our environment is protected. When we did the Meskigukjuzen wind farm, and we had to go as the proponent to our communities to talk about what's important to them when we were talking about our environmental assessment. And they said, well, what are the impacts on our moose and what are the impacts on our medicinal plants? Which aren't a part of the normal study that the province would require. But because it was important to our communities, as the proponent, we insisted that we develop studies to be able to answer to our community. So again, it brought us a better project, even though it took more time and resources. At the end of the day, we're able to say with confidence that the project does not have an impact on our moose, their migratory paths. It doesn't have an impact on our medicinal plants, where it's located, because we took the time, we spent the money, and we did the project in the right way. Which again is encompassed in that SDG clean energy pyramid. So we go over to the next slide, and I'm almost getting ready to wrap up here. So just in terms of Indigenous clean energy and how it expresses our culture to achieve multiple impacts, in all of our different languages. I know in Mi'kmaq we would say "ulnu wogadeo." I haven't heard it in a while, but communal well-being, taking care of ourselves. In Ojibwe, they have a similar saying, that's "gika gimna," which means everything in creation. So that, again, always being the guiding principles and how projects are done with Indigenous communities, that are always protecting our social and economical sustainability, that goes hand in hand with clean energy projects. And then always going back to our two-eyed seeing, where we're using the knowledge and the wisdom from our elders, and also using the science and technology and bringing that together so that we're able to honor ourselves as Indigenous people, do projects in a good way, and have that balance. So then here, the last slide, I just want to wrap it up by again going over a bit of the clean energy projects inventory that exist in the different quadrants of renewable energy. So within the renewables, you'll see a list of the projects in energy efficiency, advanced energy, and green energy. Those are the types of projects that we talk about in our programming here at ICE and our capacity building programs. So, and I'm happy to share more information on that, but I just wanted to, again, thank you for the opportunity to listen, to allow me to present on clean energy opportunities and what we're seeing across the country. Of course, always mindful that different provinces and territories have different priorities and policies and laws that they have to that they're enforcing. So, you always want to be mindful of that when you're looking at projects, but just trying to start challenging people to get a little bit more outside of the box and to really start thinking about how we're going to lead in this next stage of clean energy projects and developments, especially in the Atlantic. There's a huge opportunity to get our people trained and out there working. So, happy to be a part of this, and I'm looking forward to hearing, about all of the great work that you're doing, and hopefully we get to see each other in person sooner than later, now that we seem to be through the fog of the pandemic. So, Lalin, Aknamotas.
Well, and Terri, Lynn, for kicking us off this morning, and it was a really informative session, and we appreciate you joining us today. It's really good to see you, and hopefully we'll be able to connect over the next couple of days. And we're a bit ahead of schedule, so we're going to open. We're going to do some Q&A, and I think we have one question. Out of all the clean energy opportunities coming up, which would you say you are most excited for?
Well, I mean, in terms of the clean energy opportunities that are ahead, I think that for me, what gets me most excited is the energy efficiency opportunity in housing. Number one, being because I lived in community for most of my life. I moved into the city when I turned 38. So, going back home, I see things in a different view. And when I'm in, my mom's house, my dad's house, I'm starting to really observe, the challenges that they're faced with, just being home for Christmas and like worrying about the oil truck showing up and, are they going to be like, how are we saving energy and these real issues that we're faced with in our communities. So I think that by having energy efficiency projects, like the communities focusing on that, it really gives something back to our communities where, our elders are going to be able to live in homes that are heated safely and that are going to keep them warm, that are not going to make them sick, that can, we don't have like wood burning stoves that are causing health issues. So for me, I'm most excited about the opportunities that exist in energy efficiency for our communities. And then if I think about what I'm most excited about in terms of where we are, in this day and age, here at ICE, we definitely see a lot of opportunities for Indigenous youth. And we've done a lot of work in the last year to get some programs off the ground, one being Generation Power. And my colleague, Ricky Lee Watts, will be here with me later today in the World Cafe. But we're supporting Indigenous youth who want to work in clean energy, to have careers. So we basically have a program that introduces them to Clean Energy 101, a lot more than my quick presentation here. But it gives them the skills, it gives them the mentorship, it gives them an opportunity to work with an employer, to have the support that they need to kickstart a career. And so for me, I think that that's really exciting, because if I look back to where I was, 10, 15 years ago when I was a youth, had I had those opportunities, I wonder where I would be sitting today. So that really excites me. Another thing that really excites me is, that these youth that are coming up, and I find it odd. I mean, I crossed over the youth horizon not that long ago. But I used to think like, oh, geez, here they are talking about the youth and everybody says that we're the ones that are going to make the difference. And, but I really believe that now. And I do see that there's such strong leadership that's coming up, and that, I'm so glad that we're able to work in this space and to open those doors and to change the history that we have. So I think that that's what most excites me, is that, when you're in the work and you're doing it, it doesn't feel so great. But when you're able to look back and see how the story has changed, that's where the real opportunity lies for me.
Awesome. We do have a couple of questions, and if anyone has any questions, please add them to the comments or the Q&A section of Hopin. Next question: as a small business person, I'd like to start my own green tech business, but I don't know where to start. Do you have any suggestions?
Yes. Well, part of what we've been working really hard here at ICE is to be able to provide supports to Indigenous entrepreneurs that want to work in clean energy as well. So what I would recommend is that you get in contact with us over at ICE, and we do have what's called a technical services grant. And there's a process there that you can apply where we will triage your request and put you in touch with mentors who can help get your project off the ground or provide you with that support in the right direction. And there's also a possibility to access up to $10,000 in a technical service grant to help get some of your work going. So that would be the starting point that I would recommend, or that's where I would go if I was looking to start a business in clean tech right now.
Awesome. Great. Another question, are there any summer student opportunities for you to apply this summer?
Yes. Actually, one of the nice things that came out of COVID is that when we started, we were a small team of 8 all working in Ottawa, which is partly why I got up and moved and came here. But with COVID, we've now expanded to a team of almost 30, and we're climbing every month, and we're working across the country remotely. So we are definitely going to have summer student job opportunities. I know that we did put in applications, so do follow us on our social medias. We are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And we have the ICE network, icenet.work, where all of our opportunities are posted. So that's where you can find all that information.
Awesome. Thanks, Terri. You might have already touched on this a bit. The next question is, what is ICE doing to ensure that entrepreneurs developing innovative clean energy solutions to cut back on the carbon footprint?
Well, again, so part of our programming that we're delivering, the 2020 Catalyst program, Generation Power, like I had mentioned, are capacity building programs that give you deep dives into project development and how projects are done in a good way. So part of our curriculum, we are actually revamping it this year to change how we're delivering the component on entrepreneurship. So we are looking to work with other Indigenous entrepreneurs in this space who have that experience. We're also looking to develop some case studies that our participants can go through, where they're put into those exercises where they have to think in that way. So that's how we do that training, is having those conversations and sharing what has been done, what works, and what doesn't.
Another question is, I know we know that ICE has a Catalyst program. Would you be able to share what the program is about and how individuals can get involved?
Mm-hmm, sure. So part of our first capacity building program, which really got ICE off the ground, was the 2020 Catalyst program. And essentially what that is, and we're actually working with the University of Ottawa, I believe, or Carleton, one of them, right now, to get the 2020 Catalyst program recognized as part of a credit towards a master's in sustainability in the university. Because essentially what it is a 3-week on-site training session. So 1 week of the month, and we're starting that in May this year, and it runs every year. So typically runs June, July, August, where catalysts, so 20 members from across the country from First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities are brought together. So this year we're meeting, our first on-site week is in Osoyoos, British Columbia. So we come together and we do clean energy training. So we'll start with clean energy planning. The catalysts go through from, nuts and bolts on what it takes to do clean energy planning into their community, all the way through to project financing and implementation of projects, and even getting in so far as to even being able to provide support as to how, revenues are distributed, and, having those conversations that are so important. So that's a condensed training program that's delivered, those 1 week on-site sessions. From there, we do have a mentorship program that accompanies Catalyst for an additional 9 months. So once you get the training from the Catalyst program and you're equipped to go back into your communities or your organizations and do the work, we match you with a technical mentor, and also a more of a community level mentor that will work with you on getting the project going. So, to give you an example, I'm a mentor at ICE, have been since 2016, and I typically work with communities on the social acceptability side of things. So right now I'm working with a lady in Lynn, BC, where they're going to be building a community center that's designed to be energy efficient, that's a safe space for women. And so part of what we're doing right now is engaging with the community to find out how they want to be involved in it, by asking them questions, which is what worked best, I must say, with Mesquite Juzen. When we had the training for the employment, we went to the community and we said, okay, well, out of these 12 opportunities for training, which ones are you most interested in? And at the end of it, Our community members told us that they're most interested to become heavy equipment operators, linesmen, millwrights, and electricians. It wasn't us that decided. So, those are important things to have successful projects in communities, and those are part of the training that we provide at ICE. So, the 2020 Catalyst program is really great. We have, chiefs, we have counselors, we have economic development officers and CEOs that are a part of it. We also have youth, we have elders. It's a little bit for everybody. But, after 5 years of delivering that program, one of the things that we're noticing here at ICE is that it takes more than just one person in a community to do this work. And so we're really looking at it and reorganizing ourselves so that we're able to make that headway and to share this information more broadly with leadership, through our NIOs, through groups such as JEDI, Can Do, all of those other great Indigenous organizations that are doing work. So we want to broaden our network, because it's great to have the training, but we really need to have the network, and that's where the power is. So through the mentorship program that you have coming out of the 2020 Catalyst program, we're there to support you. We also have monthly webinars where we talk about clean energy. It's a 1-hour session, so you're always getting that continuous learning. Every year we bring our catalysts together. So for example, this year, May 30th and 31st in Ottawa, we are doing a 2-day training to bring our catalysts, those that have been out of the program for 3, 4, 5 years. We're going to freshen up their skills and also get them that university credit. So we always want to grow and develop. We don't see this as a one-time sort of process that you come in and go out. We really have a family that's being built here, and if there's any catalysts that are in this session and can attest to that, I can certainly say that being a part of the Catalyst program, being a part of the community here at ICE, and working with all of these amazing communities is definitely an awesome space to be in, and I hope that you all join us.
Awesome. Thanks, Terri. I think we just have one more question. And does ICE work with Indigenous environmental scientists for the environmental impact assessment requirements for the projects such as these?
So we don't do projects at ICE. We support communities who are doing projects. So that's part of the messaging that we're really working on in terms of our communications is that, we want the message to be that we don't do the projects, we support the communities. So if there is a community that is working on a project in, let's say, wind, and they're like, hey, we don't know where to start, they probably would have a conversation with me. Whereas if there's a community that's doing a project to get off of diesel in a remote area, they probably would talk to one of my coworkers that has more experience in that space. So we are not working specifically with Indigenous scientists to do work, but if there are any, I would love to know them, because I would like to have them a part of our mentorship network. And that's something that we're looking to expand on, and which is I'm really glad that I get to invite it into these spaces, because I can pick up some contacts, such as Chief Terri, for example, who may be willing to come and share about the great work that they're doing in the Atlantic with, our group that we have in the larger space. So we're really a connecting group. So we're making those connections. We're getting people to know each other, but we're not doing the project work. So please send me any Indigenous experts that you have, so that we can follow up and have them join our ICE community.
Thanks, Terri. There was one question that just popped up. I think you were just kind of touching on it. What do you see as clean energy solutions to get First Nations off diesel in remote communities?
Yeah, so the remote communities, there's different solutions depending on where they are. For the project that I did do a project, but that was a separate thing. Project work that I was working on, not with Indigenous clean energy, but with a remote community. For them, they have a river, and they're in the Arctic. So they did, of course, look at anything that they could do to not use their river, because we all know how important the food source is to community. So they did studies on the wind, they did studies on the solar, they did, because that's part of, what we have to do when we're going to do a project, is to look at all of our options, right? Because we may think that wind's a really good choice, but it might not be good for that area. We might not be able to sell it to the grid. We might not be able to transmit it. So for them, at the end of the day, they ended up doing a run of the river project. And that was met with a lot of, red flags, right? Communities, what do you mean? Run of the river, you're going into where we're fishing. What's going to happen? They're going to flood. Hey, this is in the James Bay territory. So community members were definitely alarmed and had concerns and had questions. So by going through, again, that process of engaging with your community, we had a week-long community sessions, day and night, in radios and community halls, where, we had our team of experts that were there, the developers, the contractors, the environmental people, to answer the questions. And I think that is all the best that you're going to be able to do. And the best advice that I can give to anybody that's doing projects is that, as Indigenous communities, we're a lot more accountable than our partners as proponents. And they need to understand that we're not just doing projects and going away. We're living with this in our communities. We're living with this with our families. You know how many times I was like, people were like, can I get a job? Like when I was the wind farm project director, or what's going on with the wind farm? We kind of wear this on our faces while we're doing this work. So, being as transparent and open and showing processes is so key in this project work that you're going to do.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all for the Q&A. I would like to thank you again, Terri Lynn, for sharing all the great information today, and kind of showcasing all the great work that you and the team at ICE are doing for the Indigenous communities in Canada. So I'd like to thank you again for joining us, and look forward to connecting with you over the next couple of days.
Thanks, Sam. Mutas.